Welcome to ATÖLYE's very first community-powered dialogues, the transformative power of communities. This session is very exciting. It's called the Community Advantage, Driving Product and Service Innovation and Cultivating Loyalty. I will introduce our speakers and we can get straight into the panel. So some of you may already know Engin, who is going to be our moderator. He's the CEO and co-founder of ATÖLYE. Andreas Sommer is a board impact advisor and seasoned global business leader with over a decade of executive and non-executive board experience. Formerly co-CEO and chief commercial officer at Weleda, he now supports mission-driven boards, founders, and leaders in driving impact, growth, and meaningful transformation. Helen Keyes is an award-winning brand and design executive with over 30 years of international experience across both agency and client-side roles. Formerly the global head of brand communications and digital design at Philips, she has shaped brand identities worldwide, working with leading consultancies and running her own agency in New York. And finally, Victoria Stoyanova is a community strategist and founder of the Institute of Belonging, dedicated to helping people find their people. With experience leading global community programs for Meta, Q, and IKEA, she now supports Google in building scaled community-first founder programs. So with that, I will pass to Engin.
Andreas, Helen, Victoria, it's so nice to have you here. We've all met in different moments in the last 5 years, I would say, but so happy to see this coming together. I do want to start from a personal place in the same vein of the check-in we have asked. What was the first community that you felt a strong sense of belonging to? Because I feel that will also probably help us unpack some patterns of what we're yearning and searching for over and over again. Maybe Victoria, do you want to start?
For sure. Hi, everyone. So nice to be here. First community, I really remember the sense of, oh my God, here are my people, was Startup Weekend. It's a hackathon that's run all over the world. And I was a 20-something student, had just moved to London, and I went to a weekend hackathon and I thought, here are my nerdy friends. They are in the same Reddit chats and they go to the same places, and somehow they care about turning things from ideas to products. And it was really magical.
Helen, for you?
Hi, guys. Do you know what? Based on your comment earlier about that being an audience versus being a real member of something. So I did notice in the chat that there were a lot of folks who were part of the Apple Collective already. So I'll check that one off my list. But on a personal level, it was the Ocean Youth Club, which is a charity in the UK. And it's a sail training association. And I've just made lifelong friends. When you go to see whether you're going to go across the channel, wherever you're going, that idea of building trust through the risk that you're taking and all the things that you're doing with your crew is really interesting. And I truly have had lifelong friends through that organization.
Amazing. Andreas?
Yes, hello, everyone. So the first community was for sure my family. So this is, and it's so interesting that I learned a lot when it comes to belonging, to interaction from my family, in good ways and in not so good ways, but it was really a boot camp. And then a little later, it was the orchestra at the college. I play violin and piano. So I'm into music, and that's another passion. And the last one I shared in the check-in is my hairdresser, because that's also kind of family feeling when I go there with my daughter. It's she's Italian, and you feel already in an Italian kind of community. So that's beautiful.
Great, thank you. Now, it's deliberately diverse, the backgrounds that you come from, and you've seen probably the challenges of growing products and services and driving innovation in your own context. How has the framing of community helped you, or in some ways, where did you think it was going to help you and it didn't go all the way? So anything that you want to share from the war stories, the stuff that you were building out there in that lens, that would be much appreciated. And maybe this time, Helen, we can start with you.
Not things that have failed per se, but I just think today businesses have got so many challenges in front of them, and especially with the advancement of technology, and especially where we are with the beginning of AI and generative AI, that there's so much that's on the minds of corporations and businesses. For me, I think you've really got to think about if you're designing or building something, it's not the object, but it's the consequence of the thing that you're doing. And how do we deliver trust, build loyalty, as well as giving the best sort of product and service experience that we're capable of, and not just to shareholders, but to all the stakeholders that are involved. And I think that's really critical in how do we foster collaboration. We can use AI and etc. to actually break down silos. Somebody mentioned earlier that idea of how do we address silos. So I think that there's incredible technology that can help us do things in a faster way and sort of ideate and get things to market quicker. But I do think that it's really the consequence of design that we need to be thinking about for the future.
And in that vein, when you look at your years in Philips or before, are there specific instances where you felt that has helped you shape the products and services using this community lens in some shape or form?
So Philips Design, of which I was part of, has got a very long history. In fact, it's 100 years old this year. You're part of a pipeline of innovation, but you're also part of that initial ideation where there's a lot of stuff that's sort of in the ateliers that are in Eindhoven, etc., and the other places around the world. But really, you can't do things on your own. You have to work. You've got to do user research, usability studies, work with the organization that you're in, work with the businesses that you're in, understand what's happening in the world, connectivity, working with other partners, other brands. We live in a much more connected world. So it's just that rigor of constantly making sure that you are keeping people in the chain. You've got those connections and you're not just designing in a silo. I think it's a really important thing because it isn't, everything is done in a collaborative way. And I think that's really important, especially looking to the future of health technology and what that does for us. We've got global aging populations. There's a lot of things that we've got that we're all facing as human beings as we get older, etc. So that idea of building the capacity and the capability to work with each other, I think was really key there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Andreas, for you, when you look at, again, the business leaders and also the experiences you've had, how would you recount some of the experiences you've had?
Yes. So when working with business leaders and also recurring to my own experiences, quite often there's a feeling of overwhelm these days. There's a lot going on. And it's not only about workload, but also about the complexity. You are no longer in control of the optimal solution, but you're in charge to deliver some performance. And there's also a lot of uncertainty around. And what I see, I start with the leadership capabilities that are really needed these days. And then I make the link to community. What I see is first, you need to build some comfort with not knowing. So to be somehow okay with not knowing. And then another key competence is really a relational capacity. In order to build that trust, in order to build collaboration and to foster communities, you need to attune to people. You need to build those meaningful relationships, those resonant relationships. And that's another key competence that is needed these days for leaders. And then also you need to be visionary. You need to give some sense of meaning and some sense of direction by a vision or a purpose or however you might call that. I think that's what's most needed. And then the step towards a community it's a gateway. When you have a relational capacity, and if you trust your community that they might deliver on something you do not know, and you be honest with this, it's a super empowerment and it stimulates agency within a community. So that's from a leadership perspective, what I can share. And then more in practical terms, there are examples like cross-company collaboration. Sustainable packaging is in the fast-moving consumer goods space a real pain point. And I am working with FMCG companies or CPG companies, and there it's really important, be it by associations, through associations or other coalitions, to build a community before you start to compete, to develop solutions that are sustainable. in the packaging. There are other areas as well. So this could be another example.
Beautiful. I loved how you linked this. If you have to be comfortable with not knowing and you have the ability to build the relational capacity, in some ways, building a community can create multiple streams of value with one action, but you have to start with that leap of faith first. And in this place of not knowing and urgency, leave a bit of time for it, which is extremely difficult. And also to play back that sometimes these alliances or coalitions need to precede innovation, because it is also in line with the question from the last bit. If you're in a competitive environment, good luck then figuring out something that serves the whole system. Thank you. And Victoria?
For me, I think it's a combination of what both of you are saying. There is a sense of urgency that is definitely informed by tech happening so quickly. And I think that leads to a lot more rushed decisions and accelerated life cycles for things that are tested out. But then when they're tested out with actual people and communities are set up to support these different programs or tests, it can really hurt communities because we're dealing with people at the end of the day. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect between community being the most supportive, valuable, and transformational in big moments of transition. But then those moments of transition are in a slightly different timeline. And so I feel like sometimes we create something that's really big and beautiful, then drop it and pick it up again, and often with the same people. So there's something about if we can adopt a little bit more of a long-term view, just because of the relationships we're putting together, then we might succeed to create much more impactful products and services in the long term.
Yeah, totally agree. It's like, even you're also in this domain for as long as we are, it's not longer, Victoria. This whole language thing of you can't even build communities, you can only cultivate them, which is what we're advocating in ATÖLYE, is also about that, because building is a mechanical act where you can put bricks on top of bricks. Cultivation is like a garden where the garden won't survive if you don't water or at least prune or do something with it, if not every day, here and there. Relationships are the same. You can't just put a pause button in a relationship and expect in 2 years you can rekindle it. And that does create this hidden investment that's needed for businesses, for their ecosystems, that most of them probably think they don't have bandwidth for, or they don't have budgets for, and all that. Victoria, I'm curious how you've advocated the importance of communities in different organizations, all very large and powerful in their own ways. Has it been easy to make this long-termist, we have to keep cultivating lens, or where have you faced challenges?
I come from a very macro view of we are supporting people in their journey, and the journey takes several years or maybe even decades. So my way of usually solving this within programs is to look at ways to collaborate with other organizations who are working with similar profiles. So instead of trying to solve the entire puzzle from one place, it's because often we say, our community of like-minded people, but it's the same that yours and yours. And so very often we're looking at a similar group. And so I like to think about, well, what is the ecosystem response if that's an urgent problem to tackle or something that could be interesting to more partners? Can we look at global partnerships that would take collectively that longer term lens? And so then by having more commitment with more organizations, you tend to at least look a little bit further than the immediate 6 months, 1 year plan. But you can say, okay, we're looking at improving or designing something that would last at least for 5 years. So that's been my personal strategy of looking at moving the needle within the ecosystem, not within one player.
And basically, because it takes time to build these relationships externally, I guess the organization builds a bit of a sunk cost. Like, we've already invested so much in this, we might as well continue and grow it, which makes it a bit more robust, ironically, than if you were to just do an internal initiative that could dissipate over time. That's interesting. Helen, in your experience in Philips, but you can also recount from other contexts, has there also been a bit of a driver to do this ecosystem innovation and collaboration, or was it difficult because there are a lot of other things come into play when it's about products? IP health has a lot of privacy and security issues. Testing in health is notoriously difficult. So I'm just curious how some of these translate across domains.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got patient data, safety regulations, and etc. But I think that, just picking up on Victoria's point, is an idea of cultivating, and especially from a brand perspective. I always say there's one word that I always use, which is the word rigor. I think if we, to build a relationship or a friendship or even sustain something on a personal level, let alone on a business level or in a collaborative model with other products or services to create something, it's an investment in time and you need that rigor. And I think people sometimes don't understand how much time it takes to build relationships and build communities. And you alluded to it earlier of some things can take years. If you're going to do, in my past life of being involved in mergers and acquisitions or whatever, that it's a 5-year plan. It might be 5 years before the new brand is even seen by the public, as it were. So I think that yes, there's confidentiality involved in a lot of relationships, but it's really the trust that you have with one another and really understanding that you're there for the long haul. It's an investment, which is very difficult for people to understand, that you can spend years working on something because different industries go at different speeds as well. I was working with Merck, the vaccine company, decades ago. And I said, oh, we could all do this in a year. And they all looked at me in absolute shock. And they were just like, 1 year for them was like like a nanosecond. So 5 years was their comfort zone. So I think you have to understand what speed people are running at as well, which is interesting.
Absolutely. And I'm also noticing, like, we're talking about that long-termism, and I guess even the seed idea of loyalty is a long-termist one, because loyalty is exactly that you're loyal to a brand or you're loyal to a relationship because you've seen them keep being consistent and show up and not disappoint you and not surprise you.
Yeah, I agree. But things like that, those kinds of attributes you have to earn them. You can't say, oh, we're trusted and we're loyal.
Yeah.
You have to earn trust and you have to earn loyalty. And that comes with a very long tail of understanding where you're going to go as a business or as an organization. So you could be looking 10 or 20 or 30 years ahead of where you're going to be, because it does take time to do those things.
And I guess a bit of the current paradigm is also build fast, break often, iterate. The whole irony with it is if you're building fast, others can also build fast. So you don't accrue much of a moat you don't really have, others can catch up on you fast if you're only 3 months ahead.
Yeah.
If you're 4 years ahead, because you've been doing this for the longest time under the soil, not really creating the trees just yet. By the time it sparks, you're far ahead and you're in a different competitive landscape. Is this easy to communicate? I find it personally not so much to most leaders. It's a difficult bet for most leaders in the quarterly cycles that they're in.
Yeah.
But examples exist that if you do that long-termist game, you have much higher chance of accruing that loyalty.
I agree. And I think that to be a pioneer in certain fields and be the person with the machete cutting the path, there's lots of people who are right behind you and they've got less of a learning curve than you had to go through. But there's value in being the pioneer because you're getting that first set of learnings. Do you know what I mean? So it's an interesting dynamic because everything's speeded up, but you can't things don't happen that fast in reality.
Yeah. Andreas, what about some of your experiences that relate to this?
I could go different directions. One is when we talk about long term, there's one business area where everybody agrees it is a long term game, and that's branding. So when it comes to build a brand, you need to be consistent. You need to be conservative in many ways. Of course, innovation is needed as well. So on a product level, on a service level. But from a brand perspective, you need to be conservative and have a long-term view. And we know that the most trusted brands are those who really do this game brilliantly. And then we talk about a brand community. I think it's not exactly what a community is in this context here, but still we talk about a trustworthy relationship between the brand and the consumers. So it builds nonetheless some trust to be consistent as a brand. Then to the kind of other extremists, I'm a board member, non-executive board member. And in a board is not a non-executive board is not a team really. You meet, let's say, 6 times a year, and you're in a relatively powerful position, yet your main domain of work is other than the seat in a company. So you go there in, prepare, have some discussions, go out. And the question is, what kind of quality of collaboration can you establish in a board? And to me, to go to a board and to be authentic and to be trustworthiness is to me, or trusting is commitment, not only something you earn. That's true. I fully would agree with this, but it's also kind of commitment. You bring something in, and then you need to accept to be somewhat vulnerable. So you have to find a trade-off between power and trust. So that's a sensitive topic at times. But if you find ways to collaborate in this way, then you can also be a booster for community building, because we all live in networks and we can give access to networks. And when it comes to innovation, you also need some fresh ideas, and someone might have some aspect, and you connect the dots, or you connect the people, the right ones. And that's a way how you can contribute to community building on a board level specifically. Just those two.
Yeah, I love that. Also the tension between power and trust, because it also builds on when am I more shining with the eye, the individuation part, and when am I more leaning into the collective. And we have to just keep moving back and forth all the time.
And when you shared that collaboration is always on a personal level, the question was about non-NGOs, how can they collaborate when there's some competition for sourcing, for funding. I think on a board level, you can solve those kind of tensions. If you can agree on a board level, we talk with the other NGO and find if you can share a vision that is beyond your own organization. If you can meet with other people that are in a normative position for an organization or for a system, and you try to share a vision how those 2 or 3 or 4 organizations could create something even more meaningful if they wouldn't compete, but create something together, I think that's always very helpful. And in the B Corp movement, there's the B Beauty Coalition. That's one of those coalitions within the B Corp world, which is one of those kind of initiatives. And you can talk on a C-level with people who are empowered to take a decision, but also on a very day-to-day operational level, which is also very much needed. I think, yeah, you can contribute on those kind of solutions and community building processes.
Oh, that one, Andreas, actually, I was exposed to that also just 2 years ago in a conference in Amsterdam. And I was so happy to see all the brands next to one another, all remarkable in their own, after bigger mission. When I talked to just a few folks that were related to it, we in ATÖLYE also, I should disclose that we try to have a very candid conversation. This is not a conference, so we try to have it as open as possible. We'd rather have the real talk, because that's where the learnings lie. The stuff that I've heard is it took a lot of time to get those logos next to one another, B4B Coalition. And that's great. That's remarkable. That's the first step. It's almost like this first in this cycle of curate, engage, activate. Curation is done, makes sense, all defensible. In engagement, I don't know what's happening under the hood, of course, because we're not in it. What I've heard is, yes, those logos are next to one another, but we don't really know what to do with one another. We don't exactly know what agenda to advance. And more importantly, what are we really advocating for and therefore driving change, we can argue it's a matter of time because it's only been a few years, or it's a matter of, the system has reached a certain level of maturity, but cannot transcend to the next level of like value creation. So I'm curious on your opinion, because you do come from that industry, Andreas, and I don't think the point is to allude to specific names or entities, but I'm more interested in the patterns that help or deter us from actually building these coalitions properly.
If you share a need or a pain point, and as I alluded to earlier, packaging is a pain point in the consumer goods industry. And it's a pain point that you don't have to work on alone on your own. You can work on it together with others. And even more so if you try to find a circular solution. I think this is there's a real reason to collaborate. And what I see from the Beauty Coalition, that's the spot in packaging where they start to really work together effectively.
Nice.
Yeah.
And Victoria, you're also brokering a lot of these relationships for startups in the ecosystem. Where do you see that competitive versus cooperative spirit come alive, and like what are the patterns behind it?
Oh, again, I'm a very macro person. To me, is this advancing the industry? Great. Trying to always make it in a way where whatever partnership we're talking about, it's opening doors for both parties. I think I find a lot of joy in connecting the dots of people who wouldn't otherwise be at the same table. So that already starts with a moment of opportunity and gratitude. And it's okay, we actually wouldn't have been here otherwise. So it's already setting the tone for collaboration because it's not existing relationships with a certain tone, but it's brand new relationships where the tone gets to be established. And I think there's a lot of value in helping people see the potential meaning of their collaboration. And yeah, I think people who are in between industry play a bit of a bridge role to say, I see something that you might not see from where you are, and this is what it might look like. And then, of course, I personally might not know all the details, or there might be some like conflict or something else within. But yeah, I think there's something about the serendipity of bringing potential collaborations and relationships to the wider network. It's just fun. Who doesn't love a spontaneous, maybe useful relationship?
I think that air of open optimism is definitely needed. So thank you for that. And maybe that's a good segue to more of a future and foresight lens. I think we're all creatives in our own ways, and it doesn't exist without thinking about the future. We talked about long-termism as well. We talked about loyalty and building coalitions. So despite everything that's surrounding us, what gives you hope? Is there a specific project or platform or a coalition that you're ruminating on, that you're working on, that excites you these days? Helen, maybe we just start with you.
I don't know if I was going to say, I don't know if it's a specific thing, but I think it's interesting. We're not living in the same world, are we, at the moment? I think that what we need to do is figure out how to work together, and how do we work in an empathetic way, a trustful way, and that I think it makes business sense to do that rather than some of the things that are going on around us. It's how do we drive economic growth and in a different way to the way things, it's a different paradigm that we're in now. Do you know what I mean? It's shifted. So it's not so much things working together. I think that there's a lot of things that are on the horizon that we haven't fully got embraced or got our arms around in terms of AI, generative AI, which I alluded to earlier, that will just change everything for all of us, for good or bad. Or so I think top of my mind is how do we work together in that community style, if you like, or with like-minded people to make sure that we serve everybody. So it's not that I'm witnessing something specific. I think it's just realizing that we're at a point in time is where my head is at the moment.
Amazing. Thank you. Andreas?
What gives me hope is we are not alone. So And what I did in prep for the session is to try to sense into the communities I'm in. And taking a minute to just sense, who am I connected to? Which kind of communities or which communities am I connected to? There are a lot, actually. So I really do not feel alone. And the other thing is, it's up to us to act. So we all have an agency. And I think this combination creates hope for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
For me, the future is as good as our immediate day-to-day experience. So I think a lot about how is that enhancing our community life, our neighborhood life, like what is changing for how we interact with our immediate environment. So I daydream a lot about the future of a community center, intergenerational community intersection of different players, and that welcoming AI technologies and other ways to enhance what we already have access to, but make it more accessible outwards. Yeah, I dream of beautiful physical spaces where you go in and find out exactly who you needed to meet.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Now we have about 10 minutes. Let's open it up for the audience. But yeah, lovely conversation, Andreas, Helen, Victoria. Thank you so much.
There was a question by Gresa Isufi in the chat that I'll just voice because I thought that was interesting. Many of the most trusted brands today, say Apple, for example, have faced so much controversy for issues ranging from significant environmental impacts to non-ethical labor practices. Yet Apple continues to maintain a strong reputation for trustworthiness. What do you think allows companies like Apple to maintain that trust, even when their action seems to contradict the values they promote? And there was a short discussion that maybe that's habit, not necessarily trust.
I have a very quick response to that in terms of Apple as a brand is extremely consistent with the brand values and characteristics that it's known for originally. So there's never a compromise on product and there's never a compromise on privacy. And those are the two, I think, main flagships that keep it going. Obviously there is some issues that come up and things like that, but I think being extremely consistent on elements that people value and can't do without makes it. I'm sure Helen has a lot more to say about that.
I hate consistency with branding in the same sentence, to be honest with you. I think it is an element of consistency, but I think that their business model has just nurtured from the beginning of desktop computers through to adopting different technologies as they've come along to mobile devices, etc. I'm not sure if it's brand loyalty per se, but they've just become essential in how we function, as does their competitors. So again, I'm just saying we're living in a different world, whereas it wouldn't have mattered whether I had a phone 20 or whatever years ago. Now, if I don't have it, I can't log into my bank account. There's the necessity of the things that we've got. And I think from a product design point of view, they were very clever on actually creating those platforms that connect with each other, etc. In terms of are they squeaky clean, I don't think any brand is completely squeaky clean. And again, I don't know enough about any of that, so I don't really know if I can comment on it. But I do think that something that everybody faces, personally and commercially, is discussion around copyright, whether those things are maintained given what's the technology and the stuff that's going on at the moment around us, and whether people act with integrity or in a disingenuous way. And I think those are going to be real things that brands are going to be judged on in the future. Such a big topic.
I think there's a question by Piraye. Do you want to voice it directly, Piraye?
Yeah, I can. Hello. Thank you for your contributions. They are very precious for me because I have been thinking about it lately. And when it comes to challenges, you are talking about the communities, and I understand that these communities are coming together for a purpose. But sometimes for sure, there might be challenges. There might not be alignments. Are there any challenges that you came across and it was hard to tackle? Or how did you facilitate the process? For example, if there are different cultures or international projects, because right now we have been going through a very different process. There are many voices and it's hard to align. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but I'm just seeing it. I would be really happy to hear your experiences about the challenges in communities.
Many thanks for the question. The nature can be very different for tensions. So it depends on the nature of the tension within the board. Sometimes it's a personal thing. Then I think that's sometimes the toughest ones. And it might ultimately lead to a change in the board. So because if you can't collaborate properly, and if it's a fight for powers or that kind of, you're in a power play, you won't be productive as a board. And actually you can't allow for that. This is one kind of challenge. Another challenge is you might have very different background and you have to take a decision on something you don't feel comfortable to judge on, or you have only a limited view on it. And then one of the things I always like to do is to take a moment to give everyone in the board the opportunity to dive into what it is about. Let's say in an internationalization project, let's say we invest in the US. Let's go to the US. Let's talk with mass retailers. Let's get an understanding how the market works here, get some market insights. Although the most of the board members are not marketing and sales experts, but they need to get a feel for it before taking a decision. And of course, it's some resources, some funds that goes into everyone flying to the US and spending 2 days there. But I think that's one way to tackle it. And then what I always do is to have an informal communication line with the other board members to just, if there's something coming up, I just check in with other board members and try to get a feel for their perspective, share, and ideally with topics that are not sensitive, easy to deal with. And that's a way to build trust and start collaborating in a more easy way. Some answer.
Were you referring to it at board level, or was your question more generic across audiences, or was it across all of
Any communities, actually?
in communities? Yeah. I think historically, we're going back quite a way when I was living in the States. We met with one corporation and actually individually interviewed each of the C-suite and asked them what they did for a living. And we got 12 different answers. So I always say the first thing you do is when you're doing your interviews or talking to people, ask them what industry they're in, what business they're in, what their goals and ambitions are in. Because if you're not aligned at the very top, or you assume everybody else has got the same point of view that you've got, you're just talking to yourself. I always say, if we've created a brand or done any work from a design point of view, I haven't designed it for me, I've designed it for you. And if I can't put myself outside of that and I show it with my ego, then I'm not going to serve you. So I think you've really got to be, and it's really hard. You've got to be open-minded. You've got to really understand where you come from, and you've got to respect other cultures, other points of views, other ways of maybe delivering medicine or medical care or whatever it is. They're all equally as valid. So when you're actually looking at your solutions, that it's not that you're as inclusive as possible, but I think you have to create something that people genuinely see themselves in, so they feel that they belong to it. And if they don't, then it will push them away, which is also, you see a lot of brands, you don't fit, you're not following them, either a Coca-Cola person or you're a Pepsi person. It's a beverage in a can. So I think you've got to figure out what is it that resonates and be really respectful and not leave people out, which is really difficult to do. And that's why branding's so hard. But for me, branding is people. So the graphics is just the the veneer on the top, basically.
Great. I think we have time just for one last question by James Lang. You've got your hand raised, and then we slowly need to wrap up because we're going to have a bit of a break before our next session. But this has been amazing so far. Thanks.
Yes, agreed. Thank you all for this really interesting discussion. I had a question about the nature of brands and communities that was really arising from a concern I have. It feels like every brand will say it has a community. And I think the risk there is that it commodifies community as this thing that everyone has one, therefore it means nothing. And I just wondered if you had thoughts on, first of all, how that outcome could be avoided, if there's any way to avoid that commodification. And secondly, for brands that are genuine in investing in community and authentically are good at developing community, what can be done to help them differentiate themselves on that basis? Do we just believe that because they have an authentic community, they will develop better products, they'll have more passionate advocates, or is there something else that we could be doing to help them differentiate?
James, I just want to thank you for this wonderful question. I wish I asked this, such a great question.
Who's going to go first?
Helen, go for it. Go first.
If we get back to the root of this topic, which was products and service and how that helps build communities, I think that, first of all, products different from service, and product and service together is a sweet spot. But I think that building those capabilities and understanding what differentiates you becomes an attractor, but also a detractor of people. So it either invites people in or pushes people out. So even though there might be people that rub shoulders together in the same branding arena or whatever it is that they business or landscape that they're in, there's still enough of a difference where people are attracted, because a lot of it is subconscious or it's intangible. Branding is just such a dark art in itself, sure. But so what attracts people can be really interesting. And I always, any corporation I've ever worked with historically, when people say, how did you know that's what we were? And I said, it's just a mirror of you. So if you really do park your ego at the door and you're creating for the people that are running or have this ambition for the business, whether it's C-suite, mid-level, all the way down to the janitor, there's something about them that makes them attractive. So I think that's, if you can find that essence of what those people are, that's really where you start to see the success of the brand, in my humble opinion. So I think that becomes the differentiator for me.
I just want to add to this that I think for me, community is not a label that we can put on top of anything. It's people who self-select and elect to be part of it. And so giving opportunities for those moments to happen and for people to say, I'm part of this, is really important. And usually that means giving people opportunities to connect one-on-one together, not with a brand, but as individuals. And so there are many ways of doing that, but I don't know. I think of Airbnb hosting a summit for hosts. So hosts can say, I'm actually part of this hosting community. These are all my other host friends. And this is what we learned together. And this is how we understood we have a shared experience and a shared goal. And now we have someone to call in the middle of the night if we have an issue. And this, the relational bit, I think the brand can provide a lot of opportunities for that to happen, but can't really claim it, because unless you've interacted with other people that are the same as you, then you are an audience. So I think that's just the important thing to remember. Communities are not audiences.
Yeah, agree.
I think we want to give 5 minutes of a break before we transition out. I just wanted to thank Andreas, Helen, and Victoria. Again, it was a beautiful discourse touching many subjects around the topic and quite emergent too. And also a special shout out to Helen herself, because we've been also shaping some of these 2 days with her. So she's been a wonderful advisor through and through. Thank you so much.